All right, so hello everyone. It is Shelby Cook and Niamh here, your filmies, journalists, film critics. This
You
is
can imagine the press passes around our necks.
yeah. Imagine the pink press passes. Let me just say, I think the BFI was influenced by us. I'm just saying.
Oh, definitely.
But this is going to be a special episode just with the two of us. And we're going to be talking about kind of like what we just alluded to, the press passes that we did for the London Film Festival. So both of us were accredited as press at this year's BFI London Film Festival. And we're going to talk about some of the films that we enjoyed, kind of giving you some short reviews, just to give you an idea when and if these films ever do come out into the cinemas, giving you sort of an idea of which ones to see and which ones to look into more. So Niamh was our resident London person. So she actually got to go down to London to see all of the hubbubaloo that goes on with the festival.
Did.
Tell us about your experience.
I said to Shelby earlier on, it was one of the most hectic, manic, stressful weekends I've ever had, but also one of the most amazing weekends I've ever had. I felt, very cosmopolitan. I had to go to a very swanky hotel to get my press pass, and I was like, hi, I'm press. And they were like, it's just down here. I felt very cool. But it was amazing. I've never been to an in-person film festival. My first experiences were all last year online. So this year it was just so cool, and to see, I'd never been to a cinema full of cinema fans.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a different experience. Everyone clapped, there were big laughs, like it's such an amazing experience to be with people that just get it.
Mm-hmm.
It was so cool.
That's always what I love about the film festivals, because I've always gone to the London Film Festival. I think I've gone for like the past 6 years in a row. Obviously last year I did it all online, but last year was the first year I actually did press. The other times I just bought like a general admissions ticket. And the very first time I went to the film festival, I got a gala opening night ticket, and like it was so swanky. You like walk down the red carpet with all the people, all of the cast and crew are there, like the press people are taking pictures. It was so dramatic, and I was like, oh my god, this is the most exciting thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life. Like and it was so cool. And then 2 years ago in 2019, I went and saw a film, and I went into the toilet to use the toilet obviously after the film, and I came back out, and then Mike Leigh, like acclaimed British film director, is just standing there, just like, and we're both just staring at each other, like, and like I kind of was like, that's Mike Leigh, but then I was like, okay, and I just left.
The most film festival thing.
That was the most bizarre experience I've ever had in my life, but like that's what happens when you're at a film festival. You just see filmmakers everywhere, and it's just like it's really cool, and it's definitely something I think anyone who enjoys film should experience, like a real proper film festival, because it is a really cool thing to do.
Oh, 100%. I have a completely different story.
Oh no.
A lot less glamorous than yours, but I was trying to find a way to swizz. So if you're press, anyone who wants press in the future, the way it works is you're not guaranteed, a ticket to a screening. You wait until the day and you go and ask politely, can I have a ticket? And they might have one for you. And I was trying to swizz my way into Spencer, and I could not find the box office. I just could not find it. I was getting really manic. I had a little suitcase I was wheeling around, and it was all very hot. And I accidentally walked on the red carpet in my way in trying to find the BFI South Bank. And so I, for like 3 seconds, stood in the same spot as Beyonce,
yes,
Stewart, Jay-Z, Idris Elba. I felt cool. And then the security guard was like, excuse me, can you just follow me? I was like, yes, of course.
In those 3 seconds, you were the main character.
I was. It was my moment to shine.
It was your moment to shine. Absolutely. So do you want to talk about the films that you saw and sort of your opinions on them and your thoughts? And
yeah, of course. I've just realized it's kind of worked out. Mine were the in-person films and yours have been the in-line. So it's kind of worked out perfectly. Yeah, so I'll do it in the order I saw them. And the first one I saw was The French Dispatch by Wes Anderson. And I'm a big Wes Anderson fan. I love those kind of surrealist films anyone that's ever listened to our podcast knows. And I loved it. I was hooked from the second it started. It feels like Wes Anderson, what he's doing what he does best. It's a series of vignettes, so it's like 3 large vignettes and like 2 smaller ones, which is quite different for a storytelling. Usually it's one sort of narrative, but it worked so beautifully. It was just so compelling. Like, granted, there's been a lot of like criticism that you can't really engage in the stories, but that's the whole point of a vignette, you know.
I'll also jump in there because one of the films that I saw was also a vignette type of, it was 3 stories, 3 different stories about 3 different sets of characters, all played by the same actors. And I'm assuming
that's cool.
That's the same thing that like the French Dispatch is, right? And I actually found that with that film was called The Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy. And it was directed by, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce his name because it's Japanese and I'm going to mess it up and I'm going to be embarrassed. So the director of Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy also had Drive My Car, which I'll talk about later at the festival. But he works a lot in trilogies. So he has 3 sets to each of his films that he does. So this Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy was really interesting because it had those 3 different stories and you could see the ranges of all the actors and how great they were in all these different characters. But I will say that the first one was definitely the most compelling. And by the time I got back to the third one, I was kind of like over it.
See, I found with the French Dispatch, all of them were odd because it's Wes Anderson, of course it's going to be. But that's what's so amazing, that you're constantly like, you're not spoon-fed with Wes Anderson. You know, the shots are gorgeous, but you have to sort of work with him to understand what's going on. And I loved it. And I've enjoyed a lot of films this year, but there's not been a film that's come out thus far that's made me go like, whoa. It's not a particularly sad ending, The French Dispatch, but I was welling up that it was over.
Aww.
I loved it. I gave it like 5 stars, genuinely. It's close to beating Grand Budapest in my opinion, and Grand Budapest is one of my favorite films. I loved it. Really, really worth a watch.
I'm jealous because you got to see the 20 million Tilda Swinton movies that premiered at the festival. One of the 20 million. There's like literally 5 Tilda Swinton movies at the festival this year, and I didn't get to see one.
She was so good in it. She is like the narrator of the first vignette, and she is so fantastic. Next I saw Spencer, which was completely manic trying to get in. I didn't really know a lot about Spencer sort of going in. I knew it had a lot of hype and the trailers had really intrigued me, but I didn't really know what it was going to be. And Spencer sort of tells the sort of over Christmas, so it's Christmas Eve, Christmas Day and Boxing Day, and it is the last Christmas before Charles and Diana split. And you sort of stay with Diana throughout most of it, and it's her mental state. It is her dealing with her sort of bulimia, her anorexia, her complex mental health issues, whilst also trying to be a mother and dealing with, you know, the royals. It was wonderfully surreal, which I wasn't expecting. There are real surrealist moments, and it kind of is that mania of Diana's brain, like what she's going through. Weirdly funny in a lot of places. I was not expecting to laugh, and the whole cinema was like roaring with laughter in a lot of places, because the moments with William and Harry are just so charming. Those child actors were really sweet. It's dark, obviously there are a lot of dark themes. The only gripe I have with it is that I don't know how many liberties it took with Diana's story, and I don't know a lot about it, but I don't know what was real and what was not. And I feel, especially at the moment, there's a lot of things going around about Diana. Diana's very trendy, and I think a lot of people are kind of forgetting that she's a real person.
Just let her rest in peace.
Like, yeah, she had a lot of complex mental health issues, and obviously it's explored in that. But I feel, I don't know, I feel like if it come out any other time, I wouldn't have felt that way, but because there are so many Diana things, I think it's more overt, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I did really, really enjoy it.
I'm actually really surprised because first of all, I am not a Kristen Stewart fan, and I know that's going to get me hate. That's going to get me beaten up, but I just don't like her. I just feel like she is just Kristen Stewart. She can't play characters. She's just Kristen Stewart. And she has all of these
really good.
And see, there was one film that I have seen her in where she was probably in a scene for like 10 minutes and it was actually compelling. So I
Snow
know
White
that
and the Huntsman.
What?
Snow White and the Huntsman.
No, it was I don't remember what the movie was called, but it was at the London Film Festival. And it was just, she was in it for like 10 minutes and I was like, oh my God, she can act. She's not just I hate that noise that she makes. But like, so I'm compelled to see how she does, but I don't think I will like it just because I really can't get past just seeing Kristen Stewart in any role that she plays.
Really does lose herself in the role. I don't know if people are ever going to watch the clips of this, but she relies on the a little too much. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to audibly describe that, the shoulder
Diana look
down. She does that one too many times, but I still think it's Oscar worthy, like Oscar nominated worthy. Like she really does lose herself, and you can tell she did a lot of work for this one, so it is well worth a watch and better than Jackie, in my opinion. I never gelled with Jackie, but this I actually did enjoy.
I thought Jackie was really stylish, but I remember I watched it and I literally can't tell you anything about that movie, so that tells you how much of an impact it made on me.
This one, definitely worth a watch. 4 stars.
All right, what else did you see?
The last one I saw was the film I've been looking forward to since I heard about it in about 2019. It was Last Night in Soho. And for regulars, again, of Film East podcasting, I adore Edgar Wright. I absolutely
one Edgar Wright fan in here.
I am. I love him. I've been to the BFI before to see him screen Shaun of the Dead. I've been to Q&As. I love Edgar Wright, and I've loved all of his work. From the Cornetto trilogy to Baby Driver to Scott Pilgrim, I've loved all of it. So I was like, I'm a shoo-in to love this. And then there was a press screening before I saw mine, and the reviews were a bit muddled. And I was like, uh-oh. I'm still gonna love this though. I'm still gonna love this because I'm an Edgar Wright fan. Not everyone loved Baby Driver, so of course I'm gonna love this. And it started, and I was like, okay, it's finding its feet. It didn't work for me. It really didn't.
Oh, this is so sad.
It's really sad. Don't get me wrong. I want to caveat this with it's not a bad film. It's still enjoyable. But compared to his other work, where it so clearly knows what it is, it just felt really like, the only way I can find it is muddled. So it tells the story of Eloise, who's a fashion designer who has a special gift, and she can see into the past, and she sees Sandy and her boyfriend Jack, and it's part thriller, part horror.
Now see, I was so surprised when you said horror, because the way that it's marketed, I mean, I haven't seen a trailer for it, but the way it's marketed is just like it's this bebop 1950s London Soho type of film. So I was really surprised when you said horror.
The thing is, it's not. It's really not. And it doesn't know what it is, because it's this, I don't know how much I want to spoil for people who haven't seen it, but it goes from sort of one thing to another, and then all of a sudden it quickly changes, but it's even then it doesn't work because it's not been established. The themes in it, what it's asking you to think about, it's, I don't know, it's questionable. So it plays with a lot of female issues, which is good to see, because this is the first Edgar Wright film, well, actually the second, but the first main Edgar Wright film to pass the Bechdel test in 20 years. And
proud of him.
It took him 20 years, but he
got there.
I find it hard to describe the words. For quite accomplished actors as well, Anya Taylor-Joy, Matt Smith, and Thomasin McKenzie, their performances were really mediocre. Anya Taylor-Joy is a fantastic actress, as is Matt Smith, and from what I've seen of Thomasin McKenzie, she's great too, and it just nothing clicked for me. There are jokes where there shouldn't be jokes, and there are characters that are just so one-dimensional and there to further the plot, and it just doesn't feel finished.
Right.
Which Fred can write, whereas he's so usually meticulous in everything he does, and every single gag means something, and every single shot means something. It just feels muddled. And people were laughing, and I was like, why are you laughing? This isn't where this shouldn't, if it's a thriller, I shouldn't be laughing in the third act. I'm really annoyed. I could go on it forever. And if we do a spoiler special, then I don't want to spoil the magic. But what I will say is Diana Rigg, who plays a big part in the film, she was the best part. And I found her genuinely compelling. And at the beginning, she sadly died last year, and it's dedicated in her memory. But she was amazing.
Yeah.
3 stars.
I find that a lot of films, especially it's always so shocking to me when you have such incredible actors in a film, and then you're just like, why are these actors like so bad? Like, I've seen them I'm a big fan of Benedict Cumberbatch, and I've seen him in movies where he's just so bad, and I'm just like, why? And like, because I know he can act, but it is down to the writing. Like, if the script isn't there, it truly will, impact everything. Like, the actors can't, there's only so much an actor can do with mediocre lines.
They all felt so one-dimensional, these characters. Like, even the main character, I couldn't understand why I was meant to care for her, I think Edgar Wright, because I rewatched Baby Driver in sort of preparation, and watching it again a couple of years later as I've sort of studied film since, it is a bit cringy. Like, I still enjoy it, and it is far, like, it's so stylish filmmaking wise, but some of the dialogue is a bit like, ugh. But even this, it thinks it's cleverer than it is. There are so many, you see them in the trailer, there's a whole sequence where the two girls, the girl who can see the past and the girl who's in the past, switch places, and it thinks it's really clever. You can tell it's like, oh, look what we're doing. Isn't this really clever? And you're like, we've seen this in the trailer. All of these shots are in the trailer. Do you think, like, I don't care?
Well, and that's what, I think the Cornetto trilogy, obviously we've talked about that because we've done an episode before on it, but the Cornetto trilogy is just so brilliant because it's not trying to be more than it is. Like, it knows that it's silly. And like, I think a lot of times with Edgar Wright films, which is why I'm not really that big of a fan of his, like, I wouldn't necessarily, I think being friends with you has made me appreciate his work more.
Yeah.
But I've never seen Baby Driver, just because I know that he's more style over substance. And he prefers the style over actually having a real story or anything going on.
And this was written by the woman who did 1917, which again is very much a film that is style over substance. So yeah, again, don't get me wrong, it's not a terrible film. I wouldn't class this as a bad film. I would probably watch it again, but it's so lackluster compared to other things he's done.
Yeah. All right, well, I'll move on to mine. So I did the online screening. So as press, it was sort of hybrid. It was a hybrid style to the press. It was also a hybrid style for the entire festival. So some of the films premiered on the BFI player, and then there was also some of the films went to different locations across the UK. Unfortunately, none in East Anglia.
Nope.
Really sad. We're just the forgotten children, I guess, because we're so close to London. They just like, you can come to London.
Yeah, we jeweled the A11. You can come down. Yeah.
So I did all of the online screenings. Online screenings were quite difficult. Who knows if they're going to continue with this process in the future? I would hope that they would. But if anyone wanted to do press in the future and you don't live in London, it's a really great opportunity because it allows you to watch the films wherever you are. And you don't have to pay to be in a big metropolitan city, which is a lot of the issues with young people or critics in general who want to get into the industry and don't have the disposable income to take 2 weeks off of work and go to London and live in London for 2 weeks, or if you do live in London, you know, a lot of people don't have that ability to live in London, just period. So it's a nice opportunity because you get to do the online things, and you get to be part of that press circle, and you get a lot of like the press like emails and stuff. So you do get some exposure doing that. But it is a very different experience to what you get in actually being at the festival. And that is sort of like the charm of film festivals, is being there with, like you said, the camaraderie of all the other film people, and running into, you know, random people on the streets and walking the red carpet and all that other stuff. So it is a bit of a different experience. What I will say on the positive side of it was it encourages you, because not all the films were on the online platform, which was a bit frustrating, I think, for a lot of people, because we all sort of got the press pass under the assumption that the majority of the films would be on the online screeners for the press. And there was only like, I think 60
Yeah.
entire festival. I mean, I could have told you that the gala films weren't going to be on there, just because those are the big films. But I'm really disappointed that there weren't, especially for someone like me. I adore British cinema, and that's really why I love the London Film Festival so much, because it is part of the BFI and it champions independent British filmmakers. And I've only been able to see one British film in like 2 weeks of the festival. So I find that really frustrating that, you know, but it does encourage you to watch films that you probably wouldn't pick going to a festival. And it does encourage you to watch more independent, very, very small independent films. And that is kind of like, every year when I go to a festival, I always choose like a film just based off the stills, sort of like how, like what the look of it is. And if I want, I'll go see it just based on that from like one of the strands. And a lot of times those are some of the best films that I see the entirety of the festival. But a lot of the times those films never get picked up by distribution companies, so you'll never see them again. So festivals are a good opportunity to see those type of films that are really brilliant films that unfortunately there's just not a market for outside of, you know, film festivals or art house cinemas. And some of the films that I saw last year, like It's Never Going to Snow Again is one of them that I saw last year that I watched just purely on, I just like picked it. I didn't really read the plot. I just looked at the pictures and I was like, ooh, this looks fun. And it's coming out now in cinemas, and it's such a brilliant film. It's so good. So I would encourage, anyone's listening to this in real time, I would encourage you to go. I believe it's screening at Cinema City. So
I should go see it.
Yeah, I would encourage you to go see it, because it's a really weird and whimsical and like crazy, like surrealist film. And it's just so strange, but it's just so wonderful. And that's like the best part of a festival, is when you find a film that you just fall in love with, you know, just out of the clear blue sky.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, I just sort of wandered into the screening and here I am. And now this is one of my favorite films ever. But I think the best film that I saw, which I sort of talked about a little bit before, was this film called Drive My Car. So it's a Japanese film by a director has been to the London Film Festival quite often. He has quite a small filmography, but I think, like I said earlier, he sort of works in trilogies. So this film, along with Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy, is part of his new trilogy. I'm not entirely too sure what the third film is that's in this trilogy, because I'm not too familiar with his filmmaking, but this is just like briefly looking into him. And this is definitely, now after watching Drive My Car, I want to absolutely get more into his films, because he has just such an immaculate way of engaging you and keeping you just completely entranced in the story of these characters, even though nothing's happening. So Drive My Car is about this theater director who he works in this style of having multiple languages in his plays that he directs. So his plays are more about like the expression of the human connection, more so than what language can do. So it's more about the physicality of it than language, because obviously none of the actors can understand each other because they're all speaking different languages. So he's this theater director, and his wife is a screenwriter. And they have this really intense creative connection and creative relationship, and they're able to feed off of each other creatively. But their sort of romantic relationship is sort of struggling. She is having an affair with one of the actors in her show that she's writing. And in just the first 40, so this movie, I should preface, this movie is 3 hours long. And when I first saw that it was 3 hours long, I was like, there's no way in hell I'm going to watch this movie. But honestly, it was so good. I couldn't stop watching it. And it was just perfectly paced. It was so good. So the first 40 minutes is sort of like this intro is sort of like prologue to what's going on in the majority of the film. So in this 40 minutes, we meet our theater director and we meet his wife, and his wife dies suddenly. So he now has to cope with her death, and he's never talked to her about her infidelity and the troubles that their relationships were having. So he has lots of this like remaining trauma. And 2 years after his wife dies, he goes to Hiroshima, and this is where the plot really starts to form. He goes to Hiroshima to direct a play, and it's a adaptation of a Chekhov play. And again, it's in that multi-language style. So all of the actors are speaking different languages, so no one can really understand each other. One of the actresses in the play only does sign language, and she does Korean sign language. And it's just so, there's a scene where everyone's auditioning, and the woman who's doing the sign language comes in, and her audition is just so gripping and so enticing. And you honestly, while watching this movie, I didn't want to look away. So I was watching this movie because obviously with the online screeners, I still work, so I have to go. And I was watching them while I was getting ready for work in the morning. And like, I just didn't want to stop watching it. Like, I didn't want to pause it. I didn't want to do anything. It was so enticing. I think the actors were just so incredible. And from my understanding, this director, like the director of the film, has this very specific way that he directs his actors, where they do a lot of just roundtable readings of the script without actually doing any physical acting. And that you sort of see that process in the theater director in the movie. And it's just this really wonderfully paced, beautiful film. And it has a lot of these really quiet moments and a lot of moments of like driving. So the driving is, he drives to practice his lines for his plays. And so when he goes to Hiroshima, the theater company that he's working for doesn't let their artists drive their cars. So he gets a chauffeur, and he sort of forms this bond with his chauffeur. So there's obviously a lot of sequences of just driving and not much happening, but those sequences just feel so tender and so intimate. And it's just, I thought it was just the most brilliant film. I thought it was perfectly paced, and it always, like, especially when you have driving scenes, it always reminds me of Solaris, that really old classic film where it's like literally just like 30 minutes of this guy driving, and it's just like the most boring thing ever. Like, I literally fell asleep. But it was unlike that. It was the driving served a purpose, and it just felt like everything was meant to be there. And it was just such a beautiful film. And I would highly recommend, if it does ever come out to cinemas or it does go onto streaming, I would really recommend anyone seeing it, because it is a brilliant film. And don't be scared by the 3 hour mark, because it honestly flies by.
Yeah, if you've all seen Bond, you can watch this.
Yeah. This is so good. This is so much better than Bond. It's a fantastic, it's a fantastic character study. And I think everything that the director does, like, sort of comes together in this beautiful representation of what filmmaking is. It's an artsy film, but it's also like, it really brings the artistry of filmmaking together.
That's what's so amazing about films, is that you can have slower films. Like, not every film is going to be a blockbuster, but just because they're slower doesn't mean they can't be engaging, and it can't evoke things from you. So you have definitely sold that for me. I want to go see it.
Yeah, I would highly recommend it. I want to see it again. So the other film that I am going to talk about is the only British film that I've gotten to see. I feel like this is gatekeeping at its core, like gatekeeping all British films from me, of all people. And it's called Boiling Point, and it's directed by Philip Barnatini, and it stars Stephen Graham.
Who's literally been in everything at the moment.
But here's the thing. So I have a love-hate relationship with Stephen Graham. I think he is in a lot of things, but he plays these very one-dimensional characters where he just gets really angry and just starts shouting. And I've seen him, especially in a lot of TV shows, where he's just like this really angry little guy.
He is.
He's just screaming and yelling, and there's like no reason. Like, why is this man so angry? But I think in this film, he plays a chef at a restaurant in London, and he's sort of battling this deteriorating domestic life and these issues that he's having with his wife and his kids. And you find out later that he's addicted to drugs, with sort of this really high pressure intensity of working in a commercial kitchen. And so it's all shot in one take, and it follows him during a night, like a really busy Friday night at the restaurant. So you get a take of, throughout this whole film, you see all of the different elements that play into running a restaurant. So you see the front of house staff, you see the management, you see the chefs, and you sort of get this bubbling of anxiety within you that's just like, this is so stressful, and exactly the reason why I would never work in a restaurant, because I would start crying the minute I stepped foot into one because they are so intense.
As a waitress in the past, I know exactly what you're on about.
I would never. And that was like, what was so funny is like, I think like 3 of the characters had to go to the toilets to start crying in the toilets. And I was like, that would 100% be me. Like the minute I would start working, I would just go into tears. But it has these like really, really fantastic like microaggressions. One of the waitresses is Black, and the one table obviously has this very racist guy sitting there. And so it explores these sort of little microaggressions of how racism in British society and sexism and classism, without ever really having to say it. It's just this very simple, watching this waitress order these, jerks at a table who are just, ridiculous, and think that they're so privileged because they're buying a 200-pound bottle of wine. But anyway, so Stephen Graham is really, really brilliant. And I think what's so great about his performance, like I said, like, I think he's really great at being angry, but I've never seen him in a role where he's so controlled in himself. And he has this, and his character's on the brink. I mean, the film's called Boiling Point for a reason, because he's on the brink of exploding. And you can just feel like, you can see him trying to keep control, and he has this very tough calmness to him, this very scary calmness to him, and he never once just starts screaming, starts going crazy, doesn't throw anything. And that, I think, is the most powerful form of anger and expression, especially on film with film actors. On stage, obviously stage actors have to be more dramatic, but with film actors, because the camera is right there, and the camera doesn't really affect much of how you would view a situation, it's so difficult for actors to be so reserved and yet express so much. And that is exactly what he did. Is he was so reserved in his emotions, but you knew exactly that. You were just waiting for the moment that he was about to implode, and you knew it was coming. You knew that everything was about to go to shit, but you just never knew when it was going to happen. And it was just one catastrophe after the other, and you're building up, and you're like sitting there like, oh my God. Even you're sitting there like, I can't do this anymore. So that, I think that was what the brilliance of it was, is it really invoked the sense of anxiety and tension and like fear that you have in these high pressure jobs.
Especially with one take. Was it officially one take, or was it like Birdman where it was like,
I'm not sure. So I don't know the exact filmmaking process behind it, but it was one take. I would imagine it's probably, I think because Birdman sort of set the precedent for that, like how to make those films that make it look like it's one take.
Yeah.
I think a lot of filmmakers do that now. I think that's more common because people know how to do it. But I'm not entirely too sure. But I think that the single take style of it really helped to build that tension.
Oh, definitely, because it's that sort of theatre, you're there with them. That sounds, I wanted to see that, and it's one of those things with this pesky online platform. If you are pressed, watch out, because it does get you. If you aren't on, so I found out 20 minutes ago when Shelby told me that this is how you're meant to do it, but I have been logging on in the mornings to see what time, because they don't publish on the online platform what times films are going to come out. They do it on the morning.
They just do a countdown. You're like, now I gotta do all this math to figure out what hours. Like if you click on the video, it tells you like a countdown to when it premieres, and you're like, what is this?
I know, and working around a part-time job as well, if you're working, it's all very confusing, but I missed Boiling Point, but I really wanted to watch it. And so if anyone listening is in charge of, distributing Boiling Point and fancies distributing it in Norwich, that sounds amazing, because I really want to watch it, and I'm really gutted I missed it.
I'll send you a message later with my sneaky little thing that I got.
Ooh.
For the audience. This is going to be a mystery, but I got to see thing, and I'm going to
stay tuned, everyone.
I'm going to share it with Niamh.
I'm very excited.
But yeah, I think those were the two really big films that I enjoyed the most, that I really, really enjoyed. There were some other ones that I liked. There's a film called Memory Box, which I really enjoyed, which is sort of like, I don't know if anyone has seen Persepolis. It's sort of that same idea where it's reflecting on life as being a teenage girl in a war-torn country. And it was really interesting. It was an interesting exploration of the generations of women and motherhood and daughterhood. So I would recommend that one. I did really enjoy that. And there was a couple ones that kind of confused me. I'm still not quite sure if I enjoyed it or not. There was one called Homefront. Its German title is Hinterland, and it was just this really weird stylized, like, post World War I detective drama set in Vienna. And if anyone has seen the TV show Babylon Berlin, it was really reminiscent of that, but I was not expecting it to be like this murder mystery type of thing. It was really weird. It was a predictable plot because you knew what was going to happen. So there wasn't really much like anticipation about, oh my God, what's going to happen? There wasn't any big like penny drop moments, but it was really stylish, and it was really like, I wasn't expecting it to be like a big sort of blockbuster independent type of thing. But it was really stylish. It was very cinematic. And I think I enjoyed it. I'm not too sure, but I kept watching all of it, and then it made me miss my other film that I actually really wanted to watch. So I'm assuming that I liked it because I watched the whole thing. So I would look out for that one if you enjoy German, Austrian cinema. And yeah, so I think those were my top hits. Oh, there was a film that was, I'll just really quickly talk about this one. There was a film that was called Canon, Arm, and the Arcade Quest. And it was,
yeah, I wanted to watch this.
Oh, I was not expecting much from it, but because I was watching Azor before, and I just did not understand. Like, again, you're waking up at like 6 o'clock in the morning to watch these films, and the people in those films were talking so fast, and the dialogue was going by so fast, and it was in a different language, and I couldn't read it fast enough. So I just gave up on that one. But I started watching Canon, Arms, and the Arcade Quest, and it was so wholesome and so sweet. It's a documentary about these sort of arcade gamer enthusiasts in Denmark, I think. And the guy wants to play this video game for 100 hours, this arcade game for 100 hours. So they're talking about like training and how they got into arcade games and like what it means to them. And it was just this really, like, one of their friends who's part of this pack of arcade game lovers killed himself a few years earlier. And so they're like, we want to dedicate this gameplay, if we make it this 100 hours, we want to dedicate it to him. It was so wholesome, and it was so sweet, and I wasn't expecting it. I was like about to start crying. It was so sweet. It was just a really tender, lovely like documentary that was just, really kind of just random and out there, but it was just so sweet. And I think anyone could watch it and really appreciate, because they're just big, these guys are just big nerds and like gamers, and one of them is like this physicist PhD student and the other one's studying music or something, and so they're like these big hyper intelligent people, but it was just so sweet.
I love films like that. I love documentaries where they focus on someone with a passion. This is nothing to do with the Norwich, not Norwich, oh, you can tell what I'm thinking about, London Film Festival.
Next one,
it was a documentary called, it was like Rubik's or something, and it was a documentary about cubers. Rubik's cubers. It was on Netflix. I don't know if it's still on there, and it's about how Rubik's cubes give these people, you know, drive, and helps autistic people, you know, communicate and make friends. It was the most amazing documentary. And I love documentaries where it just shows what makes people passionate.
There was a film, there was a documentary last year at the London Film Festival that was called The Painter and the Thief, and it was about this criminal who steals this artist's like paintings, and so she wants to meet him, like when they find out who stole her paintings, and she forms this relationship with him, like this really like tender friendship with him, and she paints him. And the moment where he sees his painting, and he's like this really big butch masculine, like, you know, he's had a tough life, he's been like a drug dealer, he's been a drug addict, and he sees his painting and he just bursts into tears, and it was so tender. Like, I'm getting goosebumps right now just thinking about it, but that was one of the most tender things I've ever seen in like the history of humanity. Like, it was so sweet, and I loved that documentary. But that's again one of the films I don't think it got distribution rights anywhere, so I think it's in no man's land. But
it's always so sad.
Yeah, but see, that's the brilliant things, and when you just pick random films at a festival and then you get to see these great films, and but they're sad that you'll never get to see them again. Do you have
on that bittersweet note? Yeah.
On that lovely note.
Yeah. Do I have any final thoughts? Oh, well, it has been the most amazing experience, you know, doing press and getting to do this, because last year was all very crazy. But all I would say is that if anyone from the BFI is listening, try and make it more accessible.
Yes. I mean, I will say I value the London Film Festival because I think out of all of the big international film festivals, it is the most accessible.
Oh, definitely.
But it still has a long way to go, because not everyone can afford to stay in London for 2 weeks, or, you know, even like that was always my problem in Norwich. Like you'll pay like a good 40 quid just for a train ticket to and from, and then you got to pay for the cinema tickets, and you're only there for, you know, a day. You only get to see 2 films, and it's not very accessible for people who aren't in London.
Or I would at least say do a tiered press scheme, because I learned this festival that even if you have the press pass and you go to the press screenings that are dedicated for press, you are not guaranteed entry. So in my tiny non-film, obviously there's a reason why they do it, only give out the right amount of press passes. Like, it's obviously not everyone can go to every screening, but have a platform where press can book their screenings, so they know what they can go see and what can't. Because if it's if it's your job, and if you get there at 7 a.m. and you still can't go and see the screen, then that means someone could lose out on a commission. Like, I just think, I obviously understand why they do it, but make a platform next year that press can book their tickets, and if they can't see it, then they can book the tickets that they need to see, because the stress of not knowing if you can actually see the film is horrible. No, I love the London Film Festival. I think it's so amazing that it gives people like us press passes. It recognizes that we are press, and that is so incredible. But just make it a little bit more less horrifically stressful next time. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone at the BFI for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
All right, well, we're gonna wrap up our film festival special one-off episode. Filmish Chats.
Takes off lanyard.
Yeah, it takes off our pink lanyard. Maybe we'll do this again for the Norwich Film Festival. We'll see.
Definitely.
Give us a shout on social media if you want us to do this again. That was very influencer.
I know. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe.
Like, comment, and subscribe. You can follow us at Films _East on any of our social media platforms. That's films with an S.
I literally just got PTSD to all of the end of our Filmies chats when you said at films_East.
Films_East. And check out our website at film-east.com.
I mean, definitely do that while listening.
Yeah. All right. Well, hope everyone enjoys the rest of their lives or whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
Niamh, enjoy the rest of your evening.
I shall. Watch great films.
Yeah, watch great films and send us some messages because we love talking about films.
We do. Bye.
Bye.